I'm wearing a hat because my hair looks dumb. And I also put a pillow behind me because all these art videos are supposed to be aesthetic. And I'm not aesthetic, but I'm pretending to be online so that you'll like me. Inking. I was a little like confused as to how to do a tutorial on something like inking, and I think it's important to learn from other people, but also to keep in mind that like you should develop your own art style, and inking will kind of like come naturally with that. Part 1, the tools. I don't really like any specific inking tools. Like most of the pens that I use right now were either like presents, or I bought them at the store randomly because I liked their packaging, or I like found them somewhere. So these are some of the kinds of pens, like the shapes of pens that I find useful. They're the ones I'm using now. I use a brush pen. The ink squeezes out of the top of this one. A medium-sized pen with a soft tip that kind of bends more. A medium-sized pen with a hard tip. And then a large-sized pen with a soft felt tip. The felt is nice because you can get a lot of like movement when you're like squishing it close to the paper. You get a lot of control when it's softer, but it's also harder to use. And then just like a tiny, tiny pen is always fun to have. Yeah, because these pens are like all from different places and times, I don't really know what they're called or where they're from. I'm sorry, like I can't leave them in the description. My belief is that it's really just about the shape and size of the pen and not even really about like the brand. Because especially if you're like a starting artist or you're just learning how to ink, using the most expensive quality tools is not gonna help you like grow your skill, you know? Go to Michael's, they have a dope pack of like 3 or 4 kinds of pens. Usually it's like 12 bucks. You're probably fine. Part 2. Some general thoughts, some do's and don'ts. Here are some things that I keep in mind while inking. Where to start. I think that's like the first thing that occurs to you when you draw something in pencil and then you take out an inking pen. You're like looking at your drawing and you're like, damn, like where should I even start with this? You know, like should I go for little details? Should I like go for like the biggest line and try to follow it as long as possible? Like that's sometimes the most nerve-wracking thing, like trying to figure out where to start with a drawing. And I think I tend to start somewhere in the middle of the drawing, like in literally close to the center of the drawing. I think starting with the outside like outline of the shape is sometimes a mistake because it creates like a heavy outline throughout most of the drawing. And that can kind of make the drawing look like a weird sticker sort of. And I mean, some people's art style like lends itself to that, and again, that's why I can't say that it's like a don't. But in my own art style, I don't like to have a large outline, so I usually try to let the lines flow from the outside to the inside, so there's no like defined edge of my drawing. And yeah, so where you begin inking is a really big part of your like strategy for how the final drawing is going to look. Line weight. The most important thing to pay attention to while inking is line weight. I think this goes for every art style because like no matter what your style is, like everyone, you know, pays attention to line weight. Because in my art style, I like to vary line weight a lot. And that's because like I'm looking for contrast, because sometimes in a fully black and white drawing, the only thing to create contrast is like varying line weights and textures, and that's like totally true. But it also is just like for visual interest, you know, it's a style. So I pay attention to it a lot, and I only have drawings that are all one thickness of line if I specifically want it to look graphic. And I do that sometimes, but you have to be really careful when you do that because, again, it kind of makes it look like a sticker, which is cool, but also if you use one type of line, it's really like prone to looking kind of amateur, and it is kind of boring, you know? So if you have some color going on, I think that's usually when it's a good time to use all the same line weight, but if not, I think the drawing usually looks very flat, and it kind of looks like you didn't think about your line weight choices enough. Composition is really important, so I think drawings that feel balanced tend to have like an equal amount of like thin lines and thick lines. I think those are the drawings that are the most successful because the artist made specific choices about like how much of like each weight they were gonna use, and it kind of like equals out at the end, which is nice. Because if you have too many thick lines, then the small detail lines look like an accident. If you have too many thin lines, and the thick lines stand out a lot, and then like you wonder why they chose to like emphasize that specific line. So I think you also have to think about like what these lines are sort of like drawing the eye to, and like what, you know, what is that saying? Like, is the eye going to someplace important, or is it just kind of random? Okay, so the actual line itself. I think another thing to pay attention to is how the line starts and ends. And I don't actually like lines that start too harshly or end too abruptly. I think if we zoom in on like one of my own drawings, the part that I hate the most, and I think the thing that makes a drawing like an ink drawing look really amateur, is this little thing. It's like that little nub, you know, that like overshot the line a little. And it's like, that definitely comes from going too fast, you know, and then it looks super messy, and if your drawing has a lot of that, I think that's what immediately draws the eye and like tells you that the artist wasn't paying attention or that they didn't care. And it's like really easy to clean up with whiteout, but I think if you just pay attention and you draw slowly, those are not problems that you'll run into. And I think if you can avoid having those little nubs, it always looks so much better. That's why I'm a fan of drawing pretty slow, because it gives you so much control. Because I like a line that kind of like tapers out. It like starts slowly and then also kind of like ends more thin. Which again, it's just a stylized thing, you know? Some people really do like a block line, and that's also fine. And this next tip is like something that I always strive to do but don't always do and have to remind myself about it, which is taking breaks. And what I mean by that, I mean it's part of like the strategy of drawing slow, but it's also about really just lifting the pen sometimes and giving yourself maybe even just like a couple seconds to think about where your next line is going to start. This is when you can make decisions about like if the next line is going to be like thicker, thinner, and I think that's really, really important. And the thing is, when I ink or when I draw, I sometimes go into like kind of a trance. Usually I'm listening to something and I get like just like totally like elevate to the next plane of existence. And I think that's good, because then your body's kind of making intuitive decisions, but also, especially when you're starting out and you're learning to draw and you're teaching yourself to ink, which honestly I still am, you know, every time I draw I'm learning new stuff about the way that I want to ink and my art style develops. So you have to kind of be present in the moment, and I think lifting your pen, sometimes just taking it all the way off the paper for a second and thinking before you do your next line is really, really valuable. So yeah, I don't really have any more thoughts on that, you know, because I don't want to be an authority on this. I just want to share my own thoughts and strategies for inking. Thank you for the people who suggest this video, and if you have more questions about this topic, leave them in the comments. I read all of them. And I will be answering anything that you want to know. Also leave other suggestions for videos in the comments. Like, I get really cool ideas from you guys, and that's how these videos are born. Thank you for watching. Seriously. Goodbye.